The night my sister stole from me, I did not scream. I did not sit up in bed or call out her name or confront her in the hallway the way a normal person might. I lay perfectly still in the dark, listening to the soft rasp of paper sliding against paper, the careful breath of someone who believed the house would always protect her. And in that moment, I knew two things with absolute certainty. First, that the envelope she was taking was never just money. And second, that everything in my family was about to come apart. My name is Lillian Moore. I am 32 years old. And for most of my life, I have been the kind of woman families like to lean on and forget at the same time. Reliable, quiet, useful. The one who fixes problems without asking for credit, who absorbs tension so others can stay comfortable. The invisible daughter. The holiday this all began was Christmas, the kind my parents loved to advertise to neighbors. Warm lights, coordinated decor, matching sweaters, ordered months in advance. We gathered at my childhood home in Cedar Falls, a well-kept suburb outside Des Moines, the kind of place where nothing ugly is supposed to happen. I had agreed to stay one night. Just one. Long enough to exchange gifts, eat dinner, and maintain the illusion that distance had not changed anything between us. My older sister Vanessa greeted me at the door like a magazine cover. Perfect hair, expensive perfume, that tight smile that never reached her eyes. She hugged me with one arm, while her gaze slid immediately to my suitcase, then to my purse. She noticed everything that could be useful. My parents barely looked up from their routines. My father complained about traffic. My mother adjusted table settings that were already straight. No one asked how the drive was. No one asked how I was. This was familiar. Upstairs in my old bedroom that still smelled faintly of dust and cedar, I did something deliberate. I placed a thick envelope in the nightstand drawer right on top of a stack of old notebooks. I did not hide it. I did not lock it away. I wanted it to be seen. Vanessa noticed. She always did. That envelope contained cash, yes. But it also contained something else. Something she could not see. Something she would not think to look for. Dinner passed in a blur of backhanded comments and rehearsed praise for Vanessa's lifestyle, her boutique marketing business, her upcoming renovation, her stress, her sacrifices. I listened, nodded, and said very little. After dessert, I went to bed early. I lay on my back, fully dressed, counting my breaths, listening to the house settle. At 2 a.m, the third stair from the top creaked. Vanessa. She moved carefully. Too carefully. Like someone who had done this before. The drawer slid open. Paper rustled. She paused, adjusting the contents so everything would look untouched. Then she left. I waited until morning. At breakfast, I asked calmly if anyone had been in my room. My mother snapped that I was being dramatic. My father suggested I misplace the envelope. Vanessa looked at me with wide, innocent eyes and offered excuses on my behalf. The script played perfectly, so I smiled. I apologized. I said I must have been mistaken. And I watched relief wash over my sister's face. What she did not know was that I had not come home for Christmas because I missed eggnog or tradition. 2 weeks earlier, I had received a credit alert, a soft inquiry from a lender I did not recognize, then a letter forwarded from my parents' address thanking me for interest in a business loan. Someone had been testing my credit. Someone close. The envelope was not bait. It was a diagnostic tool. And my sister had just confirmed every suspicion I was afraid to name. Standing on the back porch that morning, cold air biting my cheeks, I watched my family laugh through the kitchen window. They thought I was the same woman who used to cry in this house. They were wrong. I was not back to fix anything. I was back to document it. And what my sister had just stolen was the smallest thing she would lose before this was over. I left Cedar Falls before noon. I told my parents I had a long drive and work waiting. My mother reminded me to call more often. My father barely looked up from the television. Vanessa hugged me again at the door, her arms light, her smile triumphant. She believed the matter was settled. She believed she had won. The drive back to Chicago was quiet. Snow drifted across the highway in thin sheets, the sky low and gray. I kept both hands on the wheel and let my thoughts line up one by one, the way I had learned to do in meetings when everyone else was panicking. Emotion later, facts first. By the time I pulled into my apartment garage, my plan had already begun to take shape. I did not unpack right away. I set my suitcase on the kitchen floor and opened it carefully. Beneath my clothes, taped flat against the hard shell, was a thin folder. Inside were photocopies, notes, timestamps, everything I had prepared before coming home, including photographs. Before leaving Chicago, I had laid every bill from that envelope across my dining table and photographed the serial numbers in sequence. I had not done it out of paranoia. I had done it because experience had taught me something my family never understood. People who feel entitled do not stop on their own. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank portal. No deposits, no movement. That meant Vanessa had not spent the cash. Yet. She was holding it. That told me everything I needed to know about her urgency. Cash meant bridge money, a delay tactic, something meant to buy time while she waited for something bigger to land. And I knew what that something was. At 3 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed. Vanessa! I let it ring. She texted a minute later. You okay? Mom thinks you sounded weird this morning. I waited 10 minutes before replying. Just tired. Long year. Her response came immediately. Yeah, same. Business stress is killing me. You're lucky you only have a job. I stared at the message for a long moment, then set the phone face down. She was already laying the groundwork, reframing, positioning herself as the one under pressure, the one who deserved understanding, flexibility, help. That night I made 2 calls. The first was to my credit monitoring service. I requested a full report, not just alerts. The second was to a forensic accountant I had worked with years earlier during a corporate audit that uncovered internal fraud. His name was Daniel Brooks. He answered on the second ring. Lillian, he said, surprise in his voice. This is unexpected. I need a quiet favor, I said, off the record. There was a pause. Then tell me. I explained the inquiry, the forwarded mail, the missing cash. I did not speculate. I laid out facts. Daniel listened without interrupting. When I finished, he exhaled slowly. You think it's family, he said. I know it is, I replied. All right, he said. Send me what you have. I'll look for patterns. By morning, the credit report arrived. 3 soft inquiries, 2 credit card pre-approvals, 1 commercial lease screening, all within 10 days, all tied to a mailing address I had not lived at in over a decade, my parents' house. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to stay still. Panic would not help me. Precision would. Daniel called that afternoon. You were right, he said. This isn't random. Someone is warming up your profile, testing limits. They're preparing for a larger obligation. A guarantor, I said. Yes, he replied. And given the lease inquiry, it's not personal spending. It's business debt. Vanessa's business. The boutique marketing firm that existed mostly on social media and borrowed credibility. I thought about her lifestyle, the renovations, the shopping, the constant talk about expansion, the lack of paperwork. And then I thought about the envelope. The theft had not been about money. It had been about permission. She had wanted to see if she could take something from me and get away with it. She had. So she escalated. 2 days later, the email arrived. Subject verification of guarantor agreement. From a financial services firm I had never contacted. I read it twice, then forwarded it to Daniel and my attorney. Her signature attempt was clumsy. A scanned image, a pasted name, no digital authentication. But what chilled me was the mailing address listed for verification. My parents' home. Someone had intercepted mail meant for me. Someone had decided I would not need to know. That night I slept poorly. Not because I was afraid, but because something fundamental had cracked open. All my life I had believed my parents favored Vanessa because she needed them more, because she was fragile, because I was strong. Now I understood the truth. They did not protect her because she was weak. They protected her because she was willing to use them. And they believed I would absorb the damage quietly, the way I always had. The next morning I did something that would have terrified the old version of me. I called my mother. She answered immediately. Lillian, she said, warm and relieved, I'm so glad you called. I've been thinking, I said carefully, about Vanessa's business. There it was, the pause, the barely contained hope. She's under so much pressure, my mother said. You know how hard she works. I do, I replied. I was wondering if she needs help, financial help. The relief was immediate and audible. Oh, honey, my mother said, that would mean so much. She would never ask, but I know I said, that's why I'm offering. We spoke for 10 more minutes, about family, about stress, about loyalty. When I hung up, my hands were shaking. Not from fear, from clarity. They were willing to sacrifice my security to save her pride. That meant the game was already far more serious than I had wanted to admit. I texted Vanessa that afternoon. Heard you might be expanding. If you want to talk numbers, I'm open. The response came back within seconds. Really, that would be amazing. I'll send you everything. And just like that, she walked forward. Straight into the trap. Because what Vanessa did not understand was this. I was not offering help. I was gathering evidence. And once she handed me the documents she planned to use to destroy my financial future, she would no longer be dealing with a sister desperate for peace. She would be dealing with a woman who understood leverage and was finally ready to use it. Vanessa's email arrived just after sunrise. Subject line cheerful, casual, almost proud. Business overview and expansion plan. I made coffee and did not open it right away. I watched steam curl from the mug, felt the warmth seep into my hands. There was a time when my body would have betrayed me in moments like this. Tight chest, shaking fingers, the old fear of conflict. That version of me was gone. I opened the attachment. It was a polished pitch deck, clean fonts, aspirational language, charts that curved upward with confident arrows, a story of growth momentum opportunity, and beneath it all, desperation. I read slowly the way you read a contract you know is designed to hide something sharp. Vanessa's firm claimed revenue streams that did not align with her lifestyle expenses, client testimonials that were vague and undated, projected income based on contracts that were anticipated not signed. Then I reached the lease. Commercial property, 3-year term, warehouse conversion, monthly rent that made my jaw tighten not because I could not afford it, but because she could not. And there it was. Guarantor section. My name. Not signed yet. Waiting. I closed the file and leaned back in my chair. This was bigger than I expected. Vanessa was not just borrowing my credibility. She was attempting to strap her entire future to my spine and let me carry the weight. I forwarded everything to Daniel and to my attorney, Rebecca Shaw. Rebecca called me an hour later. "This is identity fraud in progress," she said without preamble. "Not hypothetical. Active." "I know," I replied. "You need to shut this down immediately," she continued. "We can file a cease notice. Lock your credit, alert the lender." I looked out my window at the street below, people hurrying to work, unaware of the quiet war unfolding inside my inbox. "Not yet," I said. There was a pause. Lily and Rebecca warned. "The longer this sits, the more exposure you risk." "I understand," I said, "but I need to know how far they're willing to go." Rebecca exhaled. "You're not just dealing with your sister, are you?" "No," I said softly. "I'm dealing with a system that has protected her entire life." After the call, I did something deliberate. I replied to Vanessa. "Looks thorough. Let's talk tonight. Maybe over video." Her response was immediate. "Of course, thank you. You have no idea what this means to me." I smiled. That evening, I positioned my laptop on the kitchen table. Neutral background, soft lighting, calm posture. When Vanessa appeared on the screen, she looked exhausted. Or perhaps she wanted me to think she was. "Lil," she said, voice trembling just enough, "I hate that money has to come between family." "I agree," I replied, "which is why I want transparency." She nodded quickly. "Of course, anything." We walked through these documents together. I asked questions she was not prepared for. About cash flow timing, vendor contracts, payment schedules. She deflected smoothly at first, then less smoothly. When I reached the lease, I paused. "This guarantor requirement," I said. "When were you planning to tell me about that?" Her eyes flickered. "Oh," she laughed lightly. "That's just standard language. It doesn't mean anything unless something goes wrong." "Something like default," I said. She waved a hand. "Which won't happen. And if it does," I pressed, "I'm responsible." She leaned forward, voice softening. "You wouldn't let that happen," she said. "You're my sister." There it was. The assumption, not request, expectation. I did not argue. "I need time to review this with my accountant," I said. "Of course," she replied quickly. "Take all the time you need." But her eyes betrayed her. She was on a clock. The next day, Daniel called. "She's already submitted a draft with your name attached," he said, "unsigned but flagged. So she's moving without consent," I said. "Yes," he replied, "and Lillian, there's more." He sent me a screenshot, an email chain. Vanessa had been communicating with a private financial consultant, not a bank officer, a fixer, someone who specialized in pushing questionable deals through before questions could be asked. And in one email buried in the thread was a line that made my stomach turn. "Don't worry about your sister. From what you told me, she's stable and risk-tolerant. She'll absorb it." Risk-tolerant. That was how they saw me. A buffer, a shield, a resource. I closed my eyes and thought about every holiday where my needs were minimized. Every time I was told to be the bigger person. Every time I was expected to bend so others would not have to break. That night my mother called. "Vanessa says you're thinking about helping," she said brightly. "I knew you would come around." "I'm considering options," I replied. "Well," she said, lowering her voice, "she really needs this. If she fails again." She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. Failure was not something my family tolerated in Vanessa. They outsourced the consequences. "Mom," I asked gently, "did you see any mail from me recently?" A pause. "Why would I?" she asked too quickly. "Just curious," I said. "I received a notice late." Another pause, longer this time. "Well, she said there was something, but I thought it was junk. I didn't want to bother you." I felt something settle into place. The confirmation I did not want but needed. They were intercepting my life to protect her narrative. After we hung up, I stood in the quiet of my apartment and let the truth wash over me. This was not about money. This was about erasure. They had decided my consent was optional, my stability expendable, my future negotiable. And they believed I would accept it quietly. I sat down and opened a new document. I began to write. Not a confrontation, a timeline. Dates, communications, attachments, inquiries, intercepted mail. Every step, every hand involved. By the time I finished, it was past midnight. I was no longer angry. I was focused, because now I understood the full shape of the betrayal. And once you see the whole structure, you know exactly where to apply pressure. Vanessa thought she was building a business. My parents thought they were protecting their golden child. They did not realize they were standing inside a glass house, and I was done pretending I did not know where the stones were. The hardest part was pretending nothing had changed. I still answered my parents' calls. I still replied to Vanessa's messages with measured warmth. I still asked about her stress, her deadlines, her anxiety. I let her talk herself into believing I was already halfway on her side. Inside, everything was different. I stopped reacting and started observing. Every conversation became data. Vanessa texted too often for someone who claimed everything was under control. She slipped phrases into casual messages that were meant to plant obligation. Family helps family. You've always been the responsible one. I wish I had your stability. My mother echoed the same language, just softened. She reminded me how much Vanessa had been through, how fragile she was, how one setback could break her spirit. No one asked what this situation was doing to me. That silence told me more than any confession could have. Midweek, Rebecca called again. I'm uncomfortable with how long you're letting this run, she said. Legally, you're still safe, but ethically, they're circling. I know, I replied. I need one more thing. What's that? Proof they won't stop unless forced. There was a pause. You already have that, she said. I need them to show it themselves, I answered. On Thursday afternoon, Vanessa sent another message. The landlord is getting impatient. They're asking for confirmation by Monday. Monday. That was the deadline. Pressure changes people. It makes them sloppy. It makes them reveal who they really are. That evening, I made a decision. I called my father. He sounded surprised to hear from me directly, almost pleased. Dad, I said, keeping my voice steady, I'm thinking about helping Vanessa. His relief was immediate. That's good, he said. That's very good. It's about time you stepped in. I ignored the sting. There's just one thing, I continued. If I'm going to be involved, I need everything to be clean. No shortcuts, no surprises. Of course, he said quickly. We don't do shortcuts. I almost laughed. Then you won't mind if my attorney reviews the documents I added. There was a beat too long. Well, he said slowly, is that really necessary? We don't want to complicate things. This is family. I know, I replied. That's exactly why it needs to be done right. He sighed. You've always been thorough. Translation difficult. I'll talk to your mother, he said, but don't scare Vanessa. She's under enough stress. After the call, I sat very still. That was the moment I knew. If this were truly innocent, they would have welcomed oversight. Transparency does not frighten honest people. The next morning, Daniel sent me an update. She tried to move the lease forward last night, he wrote. Your name is still attached as potential guarantor. I closed my eyes. She was accelerating. At noon, I received another email from the lender. This one more direct. They needed confirmation. They referenced prior correspondence. Correspondence I had never seen, because it never reached me. I forwarded it to Rebecca with one line. They're intercepting again. Rebecca called within minutes. That's it, she said. This is no longer passive. This is active fraud. I know, I replied. Now we act. But not yet publicly. That afternoon, I booked a private dining room at an upscale restaurant near my parents' town. Neutral ground, controlled environment, witnesses nearby, but privacy assured. Then I sent a group message. Dinner this weekend. I want us all together. I'll explain everything. Vanessa responded with relief disguised as gratitude. My parents reacted like I had just restored order to the universe. Only Rebecca knew the truth. You're staging a confession, she said. I'm staging a choice, I corrected her. Saturday came quickly. I arrived early, sat with my back to the wall and ordered water. I wanted my mind clear. When my family walked in, Vanessa looked pale. She smiled too brightly. My mother squeezed my hand as if I were already forgiven for something I had not done. We exchanged pleasantries, ordered food. Then I waited until the plates were set and the room was quiet. I want to be very clear, I began. I am willing to help Vanessa, but I am not willing to be used. Vanessa stiffened. What do you mean, she asked. I said calmly, my credit has been accessed without my consent. My mail has been redirected. Documents have been prepared in my name without my approval. My mother gasped. That's ridiculous, my father snapped. Who told you that? I know it, I replied. Vanessa laughed nervously. Lil, this is crazy. You're overthinking. I slid my phone across the table. On the screen was a time-stamped email, a scanned signature, a mailing address. Silence fell like a dropped plate. My father stared. My mother's face drained of color. Vanessa looked at the screen, then at me. "I was going to tell you," she said weakly, when I asked. After she admitted, after it was settled. "So never," I said. My mother reached for my hand. "We just didn't want to worry you." "You redirected my mail," I said softly. "You decided I didn't need to know." My father's voice rose. "You're making this sound worse than it is." "I'm describing it accurately," I replied. Vanessa burst into tears. "I had no choice," she cried. "Everything was falling apart." "You had choices," I said. "You chose the one where I paid." The room was heavy with emotion, familiar emotion, the kind designed to make me retreat. "I didn't. I'm not filing anything yet," I continued. "This is your chance to stop." They all looked at me. "Monday morning," I said. "You withdraw every document with my name on it. You notify the lender that I am not involved. You restore my mailing address. And Vanessa, you repay the money you took." Vanessa stared at me stunned. "And if we don't?" my father asked. I met his eyes. "Then I protect myself," I said. "Fully, legally, publicly." No one spoke. The check arrived. Dessert was untouched. As we stood to leave, my mother whispered, "You're tearing the family apart." I looked at her feeling nothing but clarity. "No," I said. "I'm refusing to be the glue anymore." That night alone in my apartment, I felt something shift. Not relief, readiness. Because if Monday came and they chose denial over accountability, I would stop asking and start ending things. Monday morning arrived with the quiet cruelty of inevitability. I woke before my alarm, the kind of alertness that settles in when your body knows something important is about to happen. I did not check my phone immediately. I made coffee. I stood at the kitchen window and watched the city wake up. People walking dogs, cars idling, ordinary life continuing unaware that my own was about to split cleanly down the center. At 8:30, I checked my email. Nothing. At 9, still nothing. At 9:15, my mother called. I let it ring. At 9:20, Vanessa texted, "Can we talk before you do anything drastic?" I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "You already did something drastic." The phone rang again, my father this time. I answered. "You didn't have to threaten us like that," he said without preamble. His voice was sharp, defensive. "We talked all weekend. Vanessa is trying to fix things." By withdrawing the documents, I asked. A pause. "Well, he said she's working on it." "That's not an answer," I replied. "You're being unreasonable," he snapped. "This is complicated." "It's not," I said. "It's very simple. Either my name is removed or I take action." "You always do this," he said. "You push things to extremes. You've never understood family." I closed my eyes. "No," I said quietly. "I understand it perfectly. That's the problem." He hung up on me. At 9:30, Rebecca called. "They haven't withdrawn anything," she said. "In fact, they just submitted an amended document." My stomach dropped. "Amended how?" "They removed one clause and replaced it with another. Your liability is still there. They're trying to make it look cleaner, not stop it." I laughed once sharply. "So they chose," I said. "Yes," Rebecca replied. "They did." At 9:42, I received the email that ended everything. "Dear Ms. Moore, we are proceeding under the assumption of implied consent based on prior correspondence." Implied consent. I forwarded it to Rebecca. File I wrote. The process moved faster than I expected. Rebecca had already prepared the affidavit. She submitted the fraud report to the lender, flagged the credit bureaus, and initiated a formal complaint with the Postal Service regarding mail interference. By noon, the lender froze the application. By 1, my credit reports were locked. By 2, the phone calls began. Vanessa called first, then my mother, then my father, then Vanessa again sobbing this time, leaving long voicemails that alternated between panic and accusation. "You promised you wouldn't do this. You're ruining me. How could you do this to your own sister?" I did not respond. At 3:30, a number I did not recognize called. "Ms. Moore," a man said. "This is Andrew Collins from the lending office. We need to clarify a few things." "I've clarified everything through my attorney," I replied. "Yes," he said cautiously. "But I want to be clear. There appears to be significant misrepresentation. We're obligated to investigate." "That's appropriate," I said. "Your sister may face serious consequences," he added. "I understand," I replied. He hesitated. "I just want to confirm, you did not authorize any use of your name or credit." "No," I said, "I did not." That was the last confirmation he needed. At 4:10, Rebecca emailed me. "Investigation opened. Criminal referral likely." I sat back in my chair and exhaled for the first time all day. The door was closed. There was no going back now. That evening, my mother showed up at my apartment unannounced. I knew it was her before I opened the door. The knock was tentative, emotional, the kind she used when she wanted forgiveness without accountability. I opened it anyway. She looked older than I remembered, smaller, her confidence gone, replaced with desperation. "Please," she said, stepping forward. We need to talk." I did not move aside. "You should have called first," I said. "I tried," she whispered. "You wouldn't answer." "That was intentional," I replied. She flinched. "You filed a report," she said. "They're calling it fraud." "It is fraud," I said. "She didn't mean it," my mother pleaded. Vanessa was scared. She just needed time. "She needed consent," I corrected. "She chose theft." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "You've always been so strong," she said. "Why can't you just help her like you always do?" There it was. The expectation. The entitlement. The reason this had happened at all. "I'm not strong," I said calmly. "I was conditioned." She looked at me confused. "You raised me to absorb damage so Vanessa wouldn't have to," I continued. "You taught me that my discomfort mattered less, that my boundaries were negotiable, that my role was to stabilize the family no matter the cost." "That's not true," she said weakly. "You intercepted my mail," I replied. "You watched them use my name. You didn't call me. You didn't warn me. You decided for me." She opened her mouth, then closed it. I stepped back and closed the door. Gently. I leaned against it and felt my knees shake. Not from regret, from release. Later that night, Vanessa sent one final message. "If you go through with this, don't expect me to forgive you." I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed back, "I don't need forgiveness from someone who thought they owned me." I blocked her. I blocked my parents. I blocked every number that had ever asked me to shrink for their comfort. The next morning, I woke up to silence. No calls, no messages, no family. And for the first time in my life, that silence did not feel like abandonment. It felt like space. Space to rebuild. Space to decide who I would be without the weight of other people's choices dragging at my ankles. The investigation would take time. There would be fallout. There would be consequences I could not yet see. But the hardest part was already over. I had stopped negotiating my worth. And once you do that, nothing has power over you again. The silence did not last. It never does. 3 days after I blocked my family, the consequences began to ripple outward, touching parts of my life I had not expected to be involved, not in dramatic explosions, but in quiet, bureaucratic ways that carried far more weight. Rebecca warned me this would happen. "When people lose access to you," she said, "they look for leverage." She was right. The first ripple came at work. On Thursday morning, my manager asked if I had a few minutes to talk. His tone was neutral, professional, but there was an edge beneath it that made my shoulders tighten. We sat in a glass conference room overlooking the parking lot. He folded his hands and cleared his throat. "I want to reassure you up front," he said. "This isn't disciplinary." That sentence alone told me everything. "There's been an inquiry," he continued. "A background verification request. It flagged a potential identity dispute connected to your credit." I nodded slowly. "I'm aware." He raised an eyebrow. "You expected it?" "Yes," I said. "My attorney is handling it." That seemed to calm him. "Good. HR just wanted confirmation that this isn't related to any misuse of company resources." "It isn't," I said. "It's family." He exhaled, relieved. "That's what I figured. Still, I wanted to check in." When I left the room, I realized something important. Vanessa had not just risked my finances. She had risked my reputation. That realization hardened something inside me. The second ripple came through extended family. An aunt I barely spoke to left a voicemail full of concern and confusion. A cousin sent a vague message asking if everything was okay between me and my parents. The story was already being rewritten. I could feel it. Vanessa had always been good at that. She framed herself as overwhelmed, misunderstood, attacked. I imagined the version of events being circulated. "Lillian is overreacting. She's always been cold. She turned on her own sister." I did nothing to correct it. I had learned the hard way that defending yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you only drains energy you need elsewhere. The third ripple was the hardest. It came late Friday night when Rebecca called me from her car. "I wanted you to hear this from me first," she said. The lender escalated the case. Escalated how I asked. "They pulled Vanessa's full application history," she replied. "There are multiple inconsistencies, inflated revenue, assets that don't exist, and a pattern." A pattern, I repeated. "She's done this before," Rebecca said. "Smaller scale, different names, nothing that triggered full investigation until now." I closed my eyes. "So this wasn't desperation," I said quietly. "This was habit." "Yes," Rebecca confirmed. "And your parents' involvement makes it worse." "What happens next?" I asked. "An investigator will likely reach out to you," she said. "They'll want a statement, possibly testimony." I felt the familiar pull of guilt, the instinct to soften, to protect. I pushed it away. "Let them call," I said. After we hung up, I sat alone in my living room, lights off, city glowing beyond the windows. I thought about the version of Vanessa I had grown up with. The girl who borrowed clothes without asking. The teenager who blamed me when things went missing. The adult who always needed just a little more help. I had mistaken pattern for personality. The call came the following Monday. A calm male voice introduced himself as an investigator assigned to the case. He asked if I was willing to answer a few questions. Yes, I said. We spoke for nearly an hour. I answered everything honestly. I provided timelines. I forwarded documentation. I described the intercepted mail, the forged signature, the pressure. At the end, he paused. I need to ask you something directly, he said. Did anyone encourage you not to pursue this? I did not hesitate. Yes, I replied, my parents. And why didn't you listen? The question surprised me. Because I said slowly, the cost of silence had finally become higher than the cost of conflict. He was quiet for a moment. That's all I need, he said. After the call, I felt drained but steady. This was no longer personal. It was procedural, and procedures do not bend for tears. That night, I dreamed of my childhood home, of standing in the hallway while doors closed around me one by one. I woke up with my heart racing, then laughed softly into the dark. Even my subconscious was catching up. 2 days later, I received an email from my mother. She had found a way around the block. She had used my father's account. Please, Lillian, we're scared. This has gone too far. Vanessa could lose everything. I stared at the words for a long time. Then I forwarded the email to Rebecca. Do not respond, she wrote back. This is witness tampering adjacent. That phrase landed like a final nail. They weren't reaching out because they understood. They were reaching out because they were afraid. And fear does not equal remorse. By the end of the week, the truth had surfaced fully. Vanessa's accounts were frozen. Her business partnerships dissolved almost overnight. Clients backed out. Vendors demanded refunds. The illusion she had built collapsed under scrutiny. My parents called Rebecca, demanding to know if there was anything they could do to fix this. There is, Rebecca told them. Tell the truth. They did not. Instead, they doubled down. They blamed stress. They blamed misunderstanding. They blamed me. And for the first time, it did not matter. Because the system they had always relied on to protect Vanessa did not care about family roles or golden children. It cared about evidence. That weekend, I did something I had been putting off for years. I cleaned out my parents' house. Not physically, emotionally. I boxed up every memory I had stored there, every hope that someday they would choose me, every belief that fairness would eventually arrive on its own. I did not throw them away. I simply stopped carrying them. On Sunday evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, my phone buzzed one last time. A message from an unknown number. This is Vanessa. Please don't block this. I need to talk to you. I can explain everything. I typed slowly. There is nothing left to explain. Then I turned the phone face down and poured myself a glass of water. I was done listening. The story was no longer about what she had done to me. It was about who I became when I stopped allowing it. And that transformation had only just begun. The thing no one tells you about standing your ground is that once you do, people don't suddenly respect you. They test you. They probe for cracks. They look for nostalgia, guilt, exhaustion, anything that might make you soften just enough for them to slip back in. Vanessa did not give up easily. 2 days after I ignored her message, she showed up at my office. Security called me before she reached my floor. There's a woman here asking for you, the guard said. She says it's urgent, family matter. My stomach tightened, but my voice stayed calm. Please ask her to leave, I said. If she refuses, escort her out. There was a pause. She's crying, he added. I understand, I replied. Please escort her out. I hung up and sat back in my chair, hands resting flat on the desk. My heart was racing, but beneath it was something steadier. Resolve. 10 minutes later, I received an email from HR documenting the incident. Professional, neutral, protective. Vanessa had crossed another line. That evening, I found a handwritten letter slipped under my apartment door. My parents. I recognized my mother's looping script immediately. Lillian, we don't understand why you're doing this. We raised you better than this. Families don't destroy each other. We are humiliated. People are asking questions. Your father hasn't slept. Vanessa is not eating. If anything happens to her, I don't know how we will live with ourselves. I read it once. Then I read it again. Not a single sentence acknowledged what had been done to me. Only what my refusal had done to them. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer, not as evidence, as closure. The next morning, Rebecca called with an update that changed the tone of everything. The prosecutor is considering formal charges, she said. Forgery, fraud, mail interference. I closed my eyes. Against Vanessa, I asked. And potentially your parents, she replied, as accessories. My chest tightened not with fear, but with something like grief. They did this to themselves, Rebecca added gently, as if she could hear my thoughts. I need you to understand that. I do, I said, and I meant it. But understanding didn't erase the ache. Later that day, I met with the investigator in person. He asked me to walk through the events again, this time on record. I spoke slowly, carefully, choosing accuracy over emotion. When I finished, he leaned back. "You know," he said, "most people in your position try to minimize things. They protect family, even when it costs them everything." "I know," I replied. "I used to be one of them." He nodded. "This stops with you." "Yes," I said, "it does." That night, I dreamed again. This time, I was standing at a long table filled with papers. Every time I tried to leave, someone pushed another stack toward me. Then I pushed the table over. I woke up smiling. The next twist came from an unexpected direction. Drew, Vanessa's husband, emailed me. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won. "Lillian, I don't know if you'll read this, but I need you to know something. I didn't know about the forged signature. I didn't know about the mail. I knew about the debt, but not how she planned to fix it. When the investigation started, she told me everything. I'm not asking you to intervene. I just wanted you to hear this from me before someone else spins it." I sat with the email for a long time. Then I replied, "Thank you for telling me. I hope you make decisions that protect you going forward." That was all. No absolution, no blame, just truth. A week later, the call came. Vanessa had been formally charged. The news did not come with sirens or drama. It came in a measured tone from Rebecca, who sounded tired but satisfied. "She's been advised to plead," Rebecca said. "Given the evidence, it's likely." "And my parents?" I asked. "They're negotiating," she replied, "trying to avoid charges by cooperating." I let that sink in. Cooperating. The same people who had accused me of betrayal were now offering information to save themselves. I felt a strange sense of calm. That evening, I went for a long walk through the city. The air was cool, the streets alive with people heading to dinners, dates, lives untouched by my family's collapse. For years, I had believed stability came from holding everything together. I was wrong. Stability comes from knowing what to let fall. When I returned home, I found a voicemail from my mother. Her voice was small, broken. "I don't recognize you anymore," she said. "You used to be kind." I deleted it. Because kindness that requires self-destruction is not kindness. It's conditioning. A few days later, Rebecca sent me the final draft of a restraining order. Given the attempted workplace contact and ongoing messages, this is prudent, she said. I signed it with my name, my real one. The night after that, I sat alone at my kitchen table and realized something profound. I was no longer reacting. I was choosing who had access, choosing what I would tolerate, choosing myself without apology. And for the first time, the future did not feel like something I had to brace for. It felt open, unwritten. Vanessa would face consequences. My parents would live with what they had enabled. None of that was my responsibility anymore. Mine was simpler, to build a life where my value was not negotiable. And in that quiet certainty, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the fragile kind that depends on everyone behaving. The solid kind. The kind that lasts. The arraignment was scheduled for a Tuesday morning, early enough that the courthouse hallways still smelled faintly of cleaning solution and burnt coffee. I did not have to be there. Rebecca had made that clear more than once. "You've already given your statement," she said. "Your presence won't change the outcome." But I went anyway. Not because I wanted to see Vanessa in handcuffs or hear the charges read aloud. I went because for most of my life, things happened to me behind closed doors. Decisions were made in whispers. Stories were rewritten without my consent. This time I wanted to witness the truth as it stood. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No drama, no theatrics, just wooden benches, muted colors, and the quiet efficiency of a system that did not care about family mythology. Vanessa sat at the defense table when I entered. She looked different. Not polished, not composed. Her hair was pulled back without care, dark circles shadowing her eyes. She wore a plain sweater and slacks, clothes chosen for invisibility, not admiration. For a brief moment, she looked up. Our eyes met. There was no anger in her expression, no accusation, only fear and something else I hadn't expected. Recognition. She finally saw me. Not as a resource, not as a safety net, but as a separate person whose life she had nearly destroyed. She looked away first. I took a seat in the back row. The charges were read in flat clinical language. Forgery, fraud, mail interference. Each word landed with weight but no emotion. Vanessa's attorney entered a plea. The judge set conditions, dates, procedures. The world moved forward without asking how anyone felt about it. When it was over, people stood shuffled out, resumed their lives. I stayed seated until the room was almost empty. That was when my parents approached. They looked older than they had a month earlier, not just aged, but diminished, as if the scaffolding that had held them upright had been pulled away. My mother reached for me, then stopped herself. "Lillian," she said softly. I stood. "I'm not here to talk," I said calmly. "We just wanted to see you," my father said. His voice cracked, and I noticed for the first time how tired he looked. "To understand." "You've had years to understand," I replied. "Today isn't about that." My mother swallowed hard. "Vanessa is sick over this." "So am I," said. "I just don't collapse outward." They stood there unsure what to do with a daughter who no longer bent to fill the space they needed. "I hope she gets help," I added, and I meant it. Then I walked past them and out into the sunlight. That afternoon I took the rest of the day off work. I walked without direction, letting the city absorb me. I ended up in a quiet park near the river, sat on a bench, and watched the water move steadily forward. I thought about all the moments I had minimized myself to keep peace, all the times I had confused endurance with love. The realization settled gently but firmly. I had never been difficult. I had been inconvenient. To people who benefited from my silence. That evening Drew called. I hesitated before answering, then picked up. "She's agreed to counseling," he said quietly, as part of the plea. "That's good," I replied. "She asked about you," he added. "She wanted to know if you'd ever speak to her again." I closed my eyes. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Not right now." "I understand," he said. "I just wanted you to know she finally admits what she did." "That's a start," I said, "not a repair." We ended the call gently. Later that night, I received a notification from the credit bureau. My reports had been fully restored. The fraud markers removed, my name, my identity reclaimed. I stared at the confirmation screen longer than necessary. It felt symbolic. The next few weeks passed in an unfamiliar rhythm. Quiet. No family calls, no crises, no pressure to intervene. I filled the space with things I had postponed. I redecorated my apartment. I took a weekend trip alone. I started therapy not because I was broken, but because I wanted to understand why it had taken me so long to choose myself. My therapist listened without interruption as I told her everything. When I finished, she said, "You weren't raised to have boundaries. You were raised to be a buffer." The word clicked into place. Buffer. Absorbing impact so others didn't have to. "And now?" she asked. "Now I'm not," I said. One afternoon, while sorting through old files, I found a childhood photo tucked into a folder. Vanessa and I standing side by side at a birthday party. She was smiling for the camera. I was looking off to the side, distracted already somewhere else. I studied that girl. She wasn't weak. She was observant. She had known even then. I put the photo back not with sadness, but with respect. By the end of the month, Rebecca called with final updates. "The case is proceeding as expected," she said. "Your involvement is complete unless you're called as a witness later, which is unlikely." "Thank you," I said, "for everything." "You did the hardest part yourself," she replied. "You didn't fold." After we hung up, I realized something else. I was no longer counting outcomes. I wasn't waiting for apologies or vindication or regret. I had already moved on. That night, I sat at my desk and opened a blank document. I began to write not for anyone else, but for myself. Not the story of what had happened, but the story of what came next. A life without inherited guilt. A life without obligation masquerading as love. A life where peace did not require permission. Outside, the city lights flickered on one by one, and for the first time I felt no pull backward, only forward. The quiet that followed was not empty. It was spacious. For weeks after the arraignment, nothing dramatic happened, and that unsettled me more than chaos ever had. I had spent most of my life in reaction mode, calibrating myself to other people's moods, crises, and expectations. Now there was no one demanding anything from me, and my nervous system did not know what to do with that freedom. So it searched for danger. I caught myself checking my phone too often, half expecting a call that would pull me back into the familiar role. I replayed conversations that had already ended, wondering if I had been too cold, too final. That old reflex still whispered that kindness meant accessibility. Therapy helped me see it clearly. "You're grieving," my therapist said one afternoon. "Not just the relationship you lost, but the role you played. Being needed gave you identity." I nodded. That landed deeper than I expected. For years, I had been the responsible one, the fixer, the calm center everyone leaned on. When that role disappeared, it left behind a hollow space that felt suspiciously like loneliness. But it wasn't loneliness. It was detox. The urge to rescue flared strongest when Drew called again. This time his voice was tight, controlled. "They're selling the house," he said. "My parents' house." I leaned back in my chair, absorbing the words. "They can't afford the legal fees," he continued, "and Vanessa's business is gone. There's nothing left to prop it up." "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. "I'm not calling to ask for help," he said quickly. "I just thought you should know before you hear it somewhere else." "Thank you for telling me," I replied. After we hung up, I sat in silence, waiting for the wave of guilt. It never came. Instead, there was clarity. They had lived for decades as if consequences were optional, as if someone else would always absorb the cost. Now that illusion was gone, and with it the scaffolding that held everything in place. I was not responsible for the collapse. I had simply stepped out of the way. A few days later, I ran into my mother at the grocery store. I hadn't planned for it, hadn't rehearsed anything. One moment I was comparing labels, the next I heard my name spoken carefully like a test. Lillian. I turned. She looked startled, as if she hadn't expected me to face her. Her hair was pulled back, her clothes plain. The woman who once managed holidays-like productions now looked uncertain, unanchored. "Hi," I said. She swallowed. "I didn't think you'd want to see me." "I didn't plan on it," I replied evenly. We stood there surrounded by carts and canned goods, the ordinariness of the setting making everything feel surreal. "I hear you're doing well," she said. "I am," I answered. She nodded as if checking a box. "I don't understand how you can be," she said quietly, "after everything." I studied her face, really studied it. The lines around her mouth, the way her eyes searched mine for reassurance she was no longer entitled to. "Because," I said slowly, "I stopped waiting for you to change." Her eyes filled with tears. "We did our best," she whispered. "No," I said gently. "You did what was easiest." She flinched. "I need you to know," she said, "that none of this feels worth it. Losing you, losing the house, watching your sister fall apart." I felt the old reflex stir, the urge to soothe, to take responsibility for her pain. "I didn't take anything from you," I said. "I just stopped giving." There was a long pause. Then she nodded once sharply, like someone accepting a verdict. "I hope you're happy," she said. "I am," I replied. And I was. That night, I dreamed of the house again. But this time, I wasn't trapped in its hallways. I was standing outside, watching the lights go out one by one. I woke without sadness. The following week, I received notice that Vanessa had accepted a plea agreement. Reduced charges in exchange for restitution and mandated counseling. No prison. Probation, supervision. A consequence, but not annihilation. I felt relief I hadn't expected. I did not want her destroyed. I wanted her stopped. There is a difference. At work, something shifted too. My manager called me into his office, smiling. "We've been watching your performance," he said. "You're consistent, strategic, and calm under pressure. We'd like to discuss a promotion." I listened, stunned. It occurred to me then that I had always been competent. I had just been distracted by managing other people's chaos. Once that energy returned to me, it multiplied. I accepted the promotion. I raised a glass of wine alone that night and toasted quietly to the woman I was becoming. Not sharper, not harder, clearer. The final test came unexpectedly. A letter arrived in the mail forwarded from my parents' old address. It was from Vanessa, handwritten. She did not apologize. She explained. She wrote about fear, about pressure, about feeling entitled and terrified at the same time, about believing I would always be there to catch her. She ended the letter with a single line. "I don't know who I am without you fixing things." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the same drawer as my mother's earlier note. Not to revisit, to remember, because the lesson was complete. When you remove yourself from a system built on your sacrifice, the system either adapts or collapses. Either way, it is no longer your burden to carry. I stepped onto my balcony and looked out over the city lights, steady and unbothered. For the first time in my life, my future did not hinge on anyone else's choices. And that freedom felt earned. Freedom sounds quieter than people expect. There was no applause when my promotion became official, no dramatic announcement, just an updated title in the system, a new set of responsibilities, and a subtle shift in how people treated me. Meetings where my input carried more weight, emails that stopped asking and started confirming. Respect, I learned, rarely arrives loudly. With the new role came travel, short trips at first, 2 days here, 3 days there, hotels that smelled like clean linen and anonymity. I welcomed the solitude. In unfamiliar cities, I could walk for hours without anyone knowing my history, my family, the shape of the wounds I carried. One evening after a long day of meetings, I sat alone in a hotel restaurant watching other diners laugh and argue and negotiate their own private worlds. I realized something that startled me. I wasn't scanning the room for exits. I wasn't bracing for interruption. My body for the first time felt like it belonged to me. The past, however, was not finished testing that ownership. The call came from an unfamiliar number late one Thursday night. I almost didn't answer. "Almost," Lillian, a male voice said. "This is Detective Harris." My pulse spiked, then steadied. "Yes," I replied. "I'm calling to inform you that your parents' cooperation agreement has been finalized," he said. "They provided documentation that corroborated the timeline you described." I closed my eyes. "So that's it?" I asked. "For your involvement, yes," he said. "There's one more thing, though." I waited. Your mother requested that a message be relayed to you through official channels, he continued. You're not obligated to receive it. A familiar fork in the road opened in front of me. What is it? I asked. She wants you to know that she understands now, he said, that she sees how much she asked of you. Silence stretched between us, and I prompted. And she said she's sorry, he finished. The word landed softly. Sorry. I thanked him and ended the call. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, phone resting in my hand, heart strangely calm. An apology had arrived. Late, filtered, safe. And I realized something that surprised me more than the call itself. I didn't feel relieved, because apologies are not currency. They don't retroactively protect you. They don't undo patterns or erase years of conditioning. Sometimes they are simply acknowledgments that arrive after the damage is done. I did not need it to move forward. That realization felt like the final lock clicking into place. The next few weeks were filled with ordinary victories. I finished a project ahead of schedule. I laughed with coworkers over drinks. I booked a trip months in advance without worrying about whether someone would need me. I started sleeping through the night. Then unexpectedly I was asked to attend mediation. Not for Vanessa, for my parents. Their attorney requested a formal session to discuss emotional closure. Rebecca raised an eyebrow when she told me. You are not required to attend, she said. This has no legal impact. I know, I replied. Then why are you considering it, she asked. I thought about it carefully. Because I said, I want to see who they are when I'm no longer dependent. We scheduled it for a Friday afternoon. Neutral location, glass walls, no power imbalance. When I arrived, my parents were already seated at the table, hands folded, faces tight. They looked smaller than I remembered, stripped of authority, stripped of certainty. I took my seat across from them. No hugs, no pleasantries. Thank you for coming, my father said stiffly. I'm here to listen, I replied, not to negotiate. The mediator nodded and gestured for them to speak. My mother went first. She cried. She spoke about fear, about wanting to keep the family together, about not knowing how things had gotten so far out of hand. My father followed. Less emotion, more defensiveness. He talked about pressure, pride, how admitting failure felt unbearable. When they finished, the room was quiet. The mediator turned to me. Would you like to respond, she asked. Yes, I said. I took a breath. I don't doubt that you were afraid, I began, but fear doesn't excuse erasure. You didn't just make mistakes, you made choices repeatedly. And those choices were built on the assumption that I would absorb the cost. My mother opened her mouth to speak. I raised a hand. I'm not angry, I continued. I'm clear, and clarity changes things. I explained my boundaries calmly. Limited contact, no financial involvement, no intermediaries, no expectation of reconciliation. This is not punishment, I said. It's maintenance. The mediator nodded. My father's jaw tightened. So that's it, he said. We lose our daughter. I met his gaze evenly. You didn't lose me, I said. You never had access to me as a full person. You had access to what I provided. Silence fell. We ended the session without resolution. And that was the resolution. On the drive home, I felt lighter than I had after any confrontation before. There was no emotional residue to process, no self-doubt gnawing at my chest. I had spoken my truth without trying to manage their reactions. That was new. That night, I stood in my apartment suitcase open on the bed, packing for another work trip. I moved with ease, choosing outfits without overthinking, folding with care, but not tension. In the mirror, I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. She stood straighter. Her expression was softer, not hardened by defense, but grounded. I smiled at her. The old narrative said that choosing yourself would leave you alone. It was wrong. Choosing yourself clears space for rest, for growth, for relationships that do not require you to disappear. As I zipped the suitcase closed, I felt something settle into place. The story I had lived my whole life had ended, and what came next was not a sequel. It was a new genre entirely. The thing about cutting ties cleanly is that the silence afterward can feel suspicious. For weeks after the mediation, nothing happened. No late-night calls, no messages passed through relatives, no emotional grenades lobbed from a distance. My parents did not reach out. Vanessa vanished completely. At first, I waited for the other shoe to drop. Old habits die slowly. I kept expecting an email, a surprise visit, a crisis, engineered to pull me back into orbit. I had lived so long in reaction mode that stillness felt like a setup. But the days passed, then the weeks, and the quiet remained intact. That was when I realized something unsettling. They were not regrouping. They were adapting. Vanessa's name surfaced first not through family, but through work. I was in a conference room reviewing quarterly numbers when a colleague leaned back in her chair and said, "Hey, random question. Do you know someone named Vanessa Moore?" I felt my spine stiffen, but my face stayed neutral. I do, I said carefully. Why? She applied for a vendor partnership through a shell company, my colleague replied. The financials were creative. The name popped because the address matched your hometown. My pulse slowed. Did compliance flag it? I asked. Immediately, she said. Too many inconsistencies. We rejected it. I nodded, thanked her, and returned to the meeting as if nothing had happened. Inside, everything clicked. Vanessa was not done scheming. She had simply changed targets. That night, I made a call. Not to a lawyer. To someone else. Her name was Eleanor Price, and she was a retired forensic auditor who now consulted selectively. We had worked together years earlier on a complex internal fraud case. She was sharp, unflappable, and allergic to nonsense. When I explained the situation, she listened without interruption. Then she said, "Your sister is not going to stop until she's forced to face reality in a way she can't reframe." "That's what I'm afraid of," I replied. There was a pause. "Do you want to protect yourself?" Eleanor asked. "Or do you want to end the pattern?" I stared out my window at the city lights. "I want it to end," I said. "Then you don't confront her," Eleanor said. "You document her, quietly, and you let her run out of road." Over the next month, I watched from a distance. Vanessa tried 3 more ventures under different names. Each one collapsed quickly. Rejected applications, flagged inconsistencies, burned bridges. The industry was small and her reputation traveled faster than she realized. Then came the message. An email, short, uncharacteristically restrained. Subject, "We need to talk." I did not open it right away. I waited until I was calm, grounded, no longer curious. Then I read it. She wrote about stress, about mistakes, about feeling abandoned, about how unfair it was that I had resources and she didn't. She did not apologize. She did not acknowledge the harm she had caused. She asked for help. I closed the laptop. For years, I had believed that the final confrontation would be explosive, that there would be shouting tears, a dramatic reckoning where everything would finally be said. I had been wrong. The most powerful moment came quietly sitting alone, choosing not to respond. 2 days later, my phone rang. Vanessa. I let it go to voicemail. She called again and again. Then came the texts. Long, rambling, shifting between guilt, anger, nostalgia, entitlement. I read none of them. Instead, I forwarded everything to Eleanor. "This is escalation," she said calmly, "which means the collapse is accelerating." A week later, the news reached me through a former neighbor. Vanessa had moved out of her house, sold most of her furniture, taken a job she had once mocked openly. Reality had arrived, and it had not been gentle. I felt a pang in my chest. Not guilt, grief. Not for what was happening to her, but for what had never been allowed to happen earlier. Accountability, limits, consequences. If those had existed when we were younger, maybe none of this would have been necessary. But grief did not mean reversal. I did not reach out. I did not intervene. I let the lesson stand. Around this time, something else began to change. I started noticing how differently I moved through the world. I stopped apologizing for taking up space. I no longer softened my opinions before sharing them. I chose relationships deliberately, not reflexively. At work, I was offered another opportunity, a leadership role on a long-term initiative. It came with visibility, responsibility, and risk. Old me would have hesitated. New me said yes without over-explaining. One evening after a late meeting, I walked home instead of taking a car. The air was cool. The city was alive. I passed couples arguing softly, friends laughing loudly, strangers lost in their own stories. I felt separate, not isolated, separate. Whole. That night I dreamed of my childhood home. But it looked different. The walls were bare, the furniture gone. The house was empty, echoing, stripped of performance. And I was not inside it. I was standing across the street, keys in my hand, turning away. When I woke, my chest felt light. I understood then that closure does not come from resolution with others. It comes from internal alignment. Vanessa did not need to understand my boundaries for them to exist. My parents did not need to approve my distance for it to be healthy. I had spent years waiting for permission to leave. I finally realized I never needed it. The chapter I had lived in my family's story was over. And the woman I was becoming did not need to be explained. She only needed to be lived. One more chapter remained, not about them, but about what comes after survival. There is a moment after a long storm when the world feels unfamiliar. The air smells cleaner. The ground looks different. Even familiar streets seem altered, as if something invisible has shifted underneath everything you thought was permanent. That was how the weeks after Vanessa's collapse felt to me. Not dramatic, not celebratory. Clear. I did not wake up one morning feeling triumphant. I woke up feeling rested. For the first time in my adult life, my nervous system was not waiting for the next emergency. No phone calls to brace for. No guilt tightening my chest, no mental calculations about how much help I could give without hurting myself. Silence had stopped being suspicious. It had become spacious. On a quiet Saturday morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of coffee and a legal-sized envelope in front of me. Inside were documents I had reviewed carefully over the past month. Not defensive paperwork, not evidence. Plans. I had spent years accumulating skills, resources, and insight while believing they were meant to stabilize other people's chaos. Now I understood they were meant for something else: creation. I filed the paperwork that morning to establish a small foundation. Not large, not flashy, focused. It would fund financial literacy workshops for women rebuilding their lives after family exploitation and economic abuse. No press releases, no public announcements, just work that mattered. As I signed the final page, my hand did not shake. Later that day, I went for a walk along the river trail near my apartment. Leaves were beginning to change the air crisp with early autumn. I passed a woman sitting on a bench staring at her phone with the same tight, anxious expression I used to carry everywhere. I did not know her story, but I recognized the posture, the one that says I am holding everything together and no one sees the cost. I kept walking heart steady. At work, things continued to expand. The initiative I had joined gained momentum. My leadership style was noticed, not because I demanded attention, but because I no longer diluted my presence. I spoke when I had something to say. I stopped filling silence to make others comfortable. Respect followed naturally. One afternoon, my supervisor asked me a question that caught me off guard. "What changed?" she asked. "You've always been capable, but now you seem anchored." I considered the question. "I stopped negotiating with people who benefit from my self-doubt," I said simply. She nodded, understanding more than she said. That night, as I prepared dinner, my phone buzzed with a message from an unfamiliar number. It was Vanessa. Just one sentence. "I see it now." No apology, no request, no justification. Just that. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I placed the phone face down on the counter and continued chopping vegetables. I did not reply. Not because I was angry, but because the conversation she wanted was no longer relevant to my life. Forgiveness, I had learned, is not the same as re-entry. You can wish someone well without reopening the door they burned down. Weeks passed, then months. My parents sent a holiday card. Neutral, polite, no return address. I placed it in a drawer and did not respond. The distance held, and in that holding, something inside me softened. I began to experience joy without guilt, rest without explanation, success without the urge to hide it. One evening, after finishing a long project, I sat on my balcony watching the city lights flicker on. The sky was deep blue, the kind that feels endless rather than heavy. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who believed love had to be earned through sacrifice, the one who thought survival meant silence. I wished I could tell her this. You were never too much. You were surrounded by people who needed you to be less. The story my family told about me had been convenient. It allowed them to take without accountability. It allowed them to mistake my resilience for obligation. I had spent years trying to rewrite myself to fit a narrative that was never mine. Letting go of them did not make me lonely. It made me honest. The greatest revenge was not exposure. It was refusal. Refusal to be used, refusal to be diminished, refusal to keep participating in systems built on my erasure. I did not destroy my family. I simply stepped out of the role that made their behavior possible. And when I did, everything changed. If you are listening to this story and something in it feels familiar, I want you to hear this clearly. Being the strong one does not mean being the expendable one. Being capable does not make you responsible for other people's choices. And walking away from harm is not betrayal. It is self-respect. I did not win by taking anything from them. I won by taking myself back. Thank you for listening. If this story resonated with you, if you have ever been the overlooked daughter, the responsible sibling, the quiet fixer who paid the price for other people's comfort, I invite you to share your story in the comments. You are not alone. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about justice, boundaries, and the quiet power of choosing yourself, subscribe to this channel. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is not payback. It is peace, and peace once claimed is impossible to steal.